ghostly mark. Cobwebs twine and shadows dance in this twilight somber trance. Candles flicker, weary wicks, ancient echoes, time's cruel tricks. Marble figures, frozen pose, amidst the silence sorrow grows. Whispering shadows, secrets keep in the depths where night meets sleep. Underneath the velvet gloom, guardians of the haunted room. Chandeliers in crystal tears reflect forgotten yesteryears, softly chanting distant cries. Through the arches sorrow sighs. Gargoyles watch with stony gaze, guardians of endless maze. Pipe organ's breath begins to rise, filling air with mournful ties. Whispering shadows, secrets keep in the depths where night meets sleep. Underneath the velvet gloom, guardians of the haunted room.
Good afternoon, chat. This is Lady Red of Black Pants Legion, coming to annoy you all with more wittering. How's everybody doing this afternoon? Hopefully everything's working. We good? I can see chat has been being terribly sensible while we were setting up. Hello, Gremos. I can see we've got Silicon Soul, Night Owl's here. Who else have we got? Well, we do, in fact, have Doctor Who, and we have an Iden, and I actually have them on Discord, so I'm going to get them to come and say hi. Hi, guys.
What's up?
Hello, Lady Red. How are you doing today?
We are doing good. I've had a nice chill morning. I've been able to read over some cool stuff because we're going to be doing something a little bit different today. But before I launch into that and why I have shanghaied the good doctor from his food truck, you may notice we have a little bit of a different puppy cam from yesterday.
Food truck's stuck in an ice ditch anyway, so you're good.
It's all right. AA can sort it out while you're hanging out here where it's warm.
Just abandoned on the side of the highway. So yeah, puppy cam.
Yes, yeah, the puppies are officially 3 weeks old as of today, and so we have graduated from the big crate with them in to the smaller one inside the pen now. So they have now the concept of inside and outside, which has been terribly scary.
Oh no.
When I
It is.
go
Go on. Yeah, it's in general means it's a bigger enclosure for them to romp around and sniff around in.
When I first put them in there this morning, I put the puppies into the little crate and we moved them in, and then I opened the flap up and they're like, oh my God, outside, and all toddled out, took a quick look around and then immediately toddled back in.
Yup.
They're just like, okay, this scary.
Yes.
Cuddle pile on the inside.
They have had Virgil and Freya come out and have a little bit of a play fight in the open area at one point today, though. So hopefully they'll do that again.
How's their mobility is improving, their eyesight is improving?
Yes, they are
Yes.
toddling more aptly every single day, and they seem to be sort of aware of things moving around them now. So it's an exciting time, and in a week, hopefully, we'll be well into the weaning process, and then it's going to be real trouble.
Oh
Migrate your microphone
my.
up just a hair. You're
I
cutting
can
out on a
do
couple
that.
syllables.
Well, I might also
Okay.
need to bring my sensitivity up a tiny bit, because after last week, I cut my sensitivity by a lot. And
Well,
if it's
you're-
not working correctly, you guys just let me know and I will fix.
It's fixed already.
Fantastic.
So just adjusting the positioning has worked. But yeah, with the little beans, the other thing that I've identified is their eyes are a cobalt blue, which my understanding is that means that they are not fully developed yet, which is normal. But it does mean that the whites of their eyes have that blue tinge to them, so they've got Fremen eyes right now,
They
which is
do.
adorable.
They do.
The spice must flow.
They are melange puppies. So that's how things are going in the world of Lady Red and Iden. How are you doing today, Doc?
I am doing okay. Just got off the night shift, got home and had some dinner, breakfast, passed out, woke up, passed out again. So I'm all sorts of crazy right now.
I have stolen you at a rather inconvenient time for you, haven't I? But we've stolen you for a reason.
In so much as I wanted to be stolen, mind you, I did this to myself, and there's nothing that copious amounts of caffeine can't fix.
Caffeine is a wonder drug. I don't know how
Speaking
people who
of,
don't
I
drink
do
it
have
cope.
a caffeinated beverage.
Excellent. You should go and grab that while I tell chat what we're up to today. So for the last 2 weeks, we've sort of opened the first hour with me wittering about things I'm passionate about in general and giving the odd shit take on various things people love, because why would I not do that?
D&D 4th ed.
We haven't had that rant yet. We have not had that rant. But
From
I'm
everything I've heard, it is a decent system. It just didn't feel like D&D.
It's well, I mean, the way I've always heard it is Fourth Ed is an excellent board game, but it's not a great RPG.
That's what I've heard. But we're not here to talk about D&D 4th ed.
We might, though, be touching a little bit on D&D 5th Ed, because I have stolen Doc for a reason. He has sent me a rather cool thing that if I do this right, you guys should be able to see in a moment. And we'll just need to reduce Puppy
Can you
Cam by a
shrinkify
little
Puppy
bit.
Cam
I
just a little
can.
bit?
I sure can. There we go.
Thank you!
So, Doctor Who is in the process of writing a campaign for a TTRPG using the lovely splat book you guys are seeing in front of you called Dark Matter. Which I've had a chance to peruse, and it's really cool. Would you like to tell chat a little bit about what it is, Doc?
So, this is the love child of a very dear friend of mine. I met him in college, and just randomly he decided to start translating a bunch of old classes to 5th ed. Because he wanted to play 5th ed with a bunch of his friends. I happened to sit next to him in the college dining hall, and we just started talking and we just started playing games, and he's just like, "Hey, I'm starting up this website. I'm going to start posting all my stuff." And we're just like, "Okay, yeah, cool." So, Middle Finger of Vecna at the time it was called, started taking off, and then he started working on this project, Dark Matter. It is a sci-fi setting, completely plug and play with D&D 5e, which has been a wildly successful product for him. It's a legitimate hardcover book. I have a couple of issues, and it's in the process of getting into a couple of brick and mortar stores, but apparently there are some politics in gaming merchandising.
That unfortunately does
But
not come as a surprise, but I hope your friend is able to get this into some brick and mortar stores, because having looked over this, this setting is
does
really
have
cool.
he does have a web store, so which is which is his company is now Mage Hand Press. So if you search Mage Hand Press on Google, you should find his website, which you can order this book either in PDF or physical, along with a bunch of other products. I'm just plugging my friend here
What
to
I
about all 30 of you.
what I might get you to do is to see if you can find the link to the website, and we will pin it in chat so people can find it easily, because we're gonna be talking about this for a while.
Mage Hand Press.
Beautiful, thank you. So
dot
while Doc is doing
com.
that, this awesome
And
cover art you
here you
guys are
go.
looking at, this is a Moorgate from the setting, which, if you've played Mass Effect, think the relay system, only instead of being, tech from a civilization that people don't know that much about and lets you do the thing, it's a giant astral beast with tech in it from a race and civilization people aren't sure about.
It is the skeleton of a long dead creature. The inhabitants of the verse do not know what it is, where it came from, how it died, or why there is a black hole in its gaping maw.
Sounds like something you'd find in Stellaris, I'm not gonna lie.
It really does, but we're going to be talking a bit about this setting today. I don't want to go into it in too much detail, because I'd love people to discover everything about it for themselves if they pick this up, and if people play games in it. But we are going to look at some of it, but specifically talk about what you're trying to do for a TTRPG taking place in this.
Yeah, so I have run some games in this setting. Mostly games that my friend has written for it, and then I've kind of improved my way into a campaign, which is like the first thing that I did in the Legion. I said, "Hey guys, I'm going to be running a sci-fi D&D game. Anybody want to join me?" And um, a regular here on a WBPL 76, Mr. Headsman Stuka, was one of the people that joined up, and we had a lot of fun until it kind of fell apart near the end, which, yeah, I mean, it happens. But what I want to do
Dude.
is I want to try and make my own campaign setting, or my own campaign story in this setting about treasure hunting and prospecting, trying to finding old, maybe possibly eldritch artifacts, or artifacts of old high technology that people don't understand.
Well, you can't go wrong with Eldritch artifacts, but you have to have at least one book
Well,
that if
you
people read it, bad
can.
things happen.
You can go very wrong with eldritch artifacts.
All right, well, let me bring my Scrivener back up over the top of that, and then if I go and find the right section, I have a section with some notes for things to talk about and prompt my brain to actually function, because I am old. So,
Yay, old.
one of the things you told
You're
me when you
not
DM'd me about this
old.
is that you're looking to write a scenario using this source book about a treasure hunting story where the treasure isn't just like some specific go out and get this. It's not going to be a fetch quest, but to be more of a sort of grand legend and something that's to be pursued and uncovered as part of the hunt, rather than knowing what you're going for. Is that right?
Looking to try and see, this is where ideas become this is where vocalizing ideas becomes like the hard thing, because I have ideas in my head, but making the words come out is hard.
Yes.
I
So
sympathize.
the opening the opening is, I'm imagining, one treasure has been found not by the uh-oh, my listening is getting dead. My
Oh,
headset
no.
is getting dead.
Oh, no headset.
Uh-oh.
And there I am, connected to my computer now.
Fabulous.
So the opening, one artifact, the artifact that started this all, was found by some prospector or treasure hunter group, not the party. And they found it, sold it, made a lot of money, but then something bad happened to the area they were prospecting in, the town they sold it in, where they were living, one thing or the other. Possibly an attack by the big bad of this campaign, of this sci-fi setting, the Roth.
Oh,
A
we're going to have a talk about them later. I'd love you to tell us a bit more
Yeah.
about them.
The Roth are, imagine the Borg, but completely biotic amalgam, and they are powered by psychically torturing brains. So they
That's
take
metal.
you, they melt your body into organic substances, keep your brain alive, torture it, and either use it as a battery or reconstruct a body around it powered by psychic energy. They are also a sort of hive mind, which the drones are controlled by the alphas and the primarchs and everything. But occasionally something goes wrong and they gain independence, which is where you can play a Roth as a player character, but you don't have any more psychic energy coming into you. So you only have like a 10, 15-year lifespan as you live off of your internal psychic energy.
It's a pretty cool species concept, and I'll have some more thoughts on that when we get down to it in a minute, but
Psychic body snatchers
yes.
with body horror.
There's a movie I want to reference. I'll wait until we're talking about these things in more detail.
Just a quick note, if anything sounds like a reference to any sci-fi property at all in this setting, that's because it is. We have a D100 table of random trinkets in here, and can you guess what number 42 is?
Is it a towel?
It is a trusty towel.
Amazing.
I just scrolled past that table as well. I'm going back up now to
How
look at
else
the
are you
hidden
going to be
detail.
a
It's
hoopy fruit
hilarious.
if you don't know where your towel is?
Sass that hoopy, yeah.
All right, I'm going to run through some of the notes I've got here, and then we can start sort of working out.
I'm sorry, I kind of got distracted. Yeah. So, adventuring party finds the first artifact. Something bad happens to that location, possibly an attack by the Roth, because maybe the artifact is related to the Roth, but people just don't know because it's old and the Roth are scary and no one knows anything about the Roth.
Yeah. That's so going to tie into one of the
the-
things that I want to talk about later as something that I think would be a great reference.
There was a map found, possibly a la like the KOTOR star map, if you remember playing that game or even know what I'm talking about. Just like, oh hey, here's a map of the universe and there's these locations highlighted. Perhaps we should go there and look for other things. So it's like there's a treasure map. And from there, the party, either contracted through one of the various factions in the in-universe or through their own giddy up and gumption, start treasure hunting.
Excellent. Oh, this is going to so tie into a note I have later on. Right, let's get chat up to speed on some of the things they need to know so they can throw good ideas at you as well, because chat is amazing and the things they've come up with for Shoal so far are really good, so we're going to make use of chat. This is totally not unpaid labor, I promise. So the
We're all
dark
friends
matter
here.
setting, to give those of you who haven't heard of it a very, very high scale idea. It is a setting that uses the entire galaxy in space where magic is an sort of anathema to the concept. Instead of it being, oh, things work because of hand wavium science technobabble, it's no, a blaster is just a very advanced evocation wand. Flying vehicles have perpetual levitation spells. Magic is an
Then-
inherent part of the setting, which I think is really cool.
And then we get to the gnomes.
Who completely throw that out on its ear because they live in a place where magic doesn't work. So whereas everybody else has these crazy dark matter engines that let them magically yeet themselves through the void, the gnomes are like, we're gonna science this bitch.
Yeah, the gnomes, everyone uses magic as their science, as their technology base. The gnomes live in an area of space dominated by what is called a dead magic zone, where magic don't work too well. So what they do is, hey, yeah, magic is nice and all, but it's just one facet of technology. We're going to power our stuff by this thing called science and electricity.
What I love, though, is that the magic is an option and it's the predominant option. So, because the
Oh, yeah.
gnomes is what you'd expect in most settings, whereas they're sort of the oddballs of this setting. And
Oh, yeah,
I think
people
that's a
don't understand
really
the
cool
gnomes at
concept,
all.
which is great. And that sort of leads to a slight segue I wanted to touch on briefly of if anybody's played Pathfinder, it has a sister project or product called Starfinder, which
During the development of Dark Matter, many people did reference Starfinder
yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
and
but
Spelljammer
I
against us. Hey, just play
really-
Spelljammer,
I
just play
really like the
Starfinder.
theming of Dark Matter, though. But I mean, the reason I wanted to touch on Starfinder is if you don't like 5e and prefer Pathfinder, I imagine you could transfer these rule sets easily enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love the theming in Dark Matter, though, having read through the source book. It's so good and so well thought out.
It's an entire 300-page source book.
Yeah. Like when you first gave us the chance to take a sneak peek at it, I'm like, okay, this is probably going to be a small little. Oh nope, that's
No. This
That's a
is
player's handbook.
this is like a $50 retail product.
yes, and
Well
I
worth
have to
every
admit,
penny.
I have to admit, it looks good and it's organized nicely. So it is a very well put together book.
No,
But
no,
I'm reading through these trinkets that you mentioned and like, oh,
no. My friend has actual business contacts at WotC.
fair. Where was it? Trinket 95, a logkeeper filled with the recordings of an enterprising captain on a mission to explore strange new worlds. My dude.
Right?
My
So,
dude.
It's not proper nerd stuff if it doesn't reference other nerd stuff. We all know
Oh,
this.
agreed.
No.
Hands down.
Everything is a reference in here. Everything is a reference. Because why wouldn't it? So yeah, Pathfinder, Starfinder, like the setting is easily translatable. The rules aren't explicitly hard and fast. Like if you want to use this setting for something else, you're more than free to. Segueing the segue, he made a horror setting set in one of the very far outside of the Ring of the Galaxy posts for a separate horror setting, which I would love to get into on a separate episode because I think you would absolutely love the concept.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, we should definitely
You
have a look
take
at that at
damage,
some
you
point.
rip up your character sheet.
Hello, Call of Cthulhu. I've missed you.
Oh my god, we had so much fun playing it.
I bet.
Anyway,
All
this
right.
is your show.
Yeah, no, and we were going to stay focused on this because we want to see if we can give you some good ideas and things to work with for building your story. So there was sort of core things I wanted to pull out without going too deep into the setting and, you know, abusing the hell out of your friend's amazing intellectual property. So I've got a list here to walk through, and of course the first thing that really stands out and was a great choice for the cover art for the book is the Moors / their mass relays. So you've got this network of interconnected black holes inside giant stellar beast skeletons that are also transit hubs. That they don't just let you get to different places, but you've got trade networks there. They're space stations.
These are cities in and of themselves with trade, commerce, and everything. Yes.
What I love about them is, one, they are thematically evocative. I mean, the idea of just dive into the mouth of this ginormous beast, a living one of which no one has ever seen, to travel to where you need to go. And then that just becomes blasé and normal. But it also having, you know, the hub there for you to do everything. It's functional. It's evocative.
The maw gates in the outer ring of the galaxy are only one way. So if you go to the edge of the galaxy, you have to hard burn back to the inside.
Which will be a hell of a time.
That takes lifetimes to do, is my understanding.
A couple of weeks.
Oh, okay.
What I really like about the concept of them in terms of mechanics and usefulness for world building and storytelling is they are a story resource in terms of, you know, that could be a whole campaign that could take forever all of its own, is trying to discover the truth behind the Moor gates.
No, you can have an entire campaign in a maw station.
Yep. If you wanted to bring it down to a smaller scale, you can do that. You've got the concept of, well, how are these things kept open for everyone to use? How do you keep that politicking and power playing that's a natural part of being a sentient species away from that? How is police work done? How is neutrality maintained? How are these places defended? What are the repercussions for somebody trying to disrupt that? I mean, you've just written 6 stories there already.
Yeah, one of the I guess ideas to get a word out that my friend writes with is the powder keg ideology.
Yes.
Where okay, what could explode in the story?
Yep. So,
and one of the things that happened was a couple hundred years ago in game time was the Avia Ra crusade to retrieve the Sepulchre Star, or to control the Sepulchre Star, a star around the black hole at the center of the galaxy, which kind of, excuse me, burned a path of destruction through the entire galaxy. They were stopped by a coalition of all of the races. And now the Sepulchre Knights kind of try and maintain diplomatic neutrality between everyone, trying to be like, okay, let's not toe too many lines, let's not get each other upset, but people still each other upset.
Obviously, because that's what happens. It's just a natural part of being sentient. But
yeah, I guess the Sepulchre Knights are like the Interpol UN peacekeeping force of the setting.
Hopefully slightly more effective at what they do. And that's only because red tape exists in real life. And,
yes,
and
they
hopefully
are.
we can handwave some of that.
They are burdened by bureaucracy.
So one of the lines that I wrote down here is the importance of hubs, and that goes back to your friend's really powerful concept of the powder keg. You need something that brings people together to give them a reason to interact, and when you give people a reason to interact, you give situations a reason to explode. So the powder keg theory is really good, and the Moors are an excellent example of that. Wilf just said you could have Space Station 13/14 in a Moorgate. Yes, you could. You could absolutely do that.
Absolutely.
That Moorgate would not be connected to the network for long.
Oh God. Oh no. So other kind of space stations, to kind of segue away from this. if you read about the halflings in the setting, they don't have a territory per se, but they do operate what are called hearth stations, which, imagine an asteroid, but it's like, imagine there's an asteroid, but like, pick up your favorite pastoral English bar, bar inn thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just pick it up and put it in space and put a dock connected to it. And the halflings run hearth stations in between everywhere. So one of the things that I was expecting was keeping, yes, party meets at a bar.
That would be my favorite place on
was-
the Citadel. The English Rose, yes please, I'd love a pint.
was keeping this to a one corner, one section of the galaxy, one quadrant, and having like a central hearth station as the hub.
Yeah.
So like, not necessarily having to go to a Moss station, but I would but like keeping it like small scale, because in Dark Matter, like, we can have big galaxy spanning campaigns, or we can have a literal D&D campaign on Faerun in here. Like, you can just explore one planet, or you can explore the galaxy.
Yeah.
I would like to explore just a couple of systems.
You know, this reminds me of a story I read once back when back when TG was still something that I enjoyed, about a dude who played a D&D game as a barbarian, ended up going and chasing down the monster that killed his family, so on and so forth. And then, as he crowned himself warlord of the local region, this giant steel beast descends, opens its maw, and out comes a human in this fantastical armor that he's never seen, who drops to his knee and is like, my lord, your rogue traitor Lord Father is dead, as are all of your siblings. You are the last heir to this legacy, and so on and so forth.
And
And
it
it
just
turns out this is
turns
just,
into Rogue Trader.
yes, it's just
Oh,
been the
that's
preamble.
beautiful.
The preamble for Rogue Trader. The
You
barbarian
can
proceeded to slap the Space Marine with a tree because what the hell?
You can entirely do that
Yeah.
in Dark Matter, yes.
One of the best books to come out of the Black Library, in my opinion, was the Liber Chaotica, which is technically a fantasy supplement before they did the Age of Sigmar rewrite. And I love the way that book is formulated, because it's the sort of thing that would also work in this setting. The concept of it is that this dude went off and went crazy because of chaos while he was, trying to write a Liber, a tome about chaos and the people who adhered to it and their rituals. And of course he went crazy doing it. And the book is written from the perspective of a dude who is annotating the original text into something other people can read, who's also going crazy as he's going through this. And it's all about it's all in the fantasy setting, but there's one section
In universe fiction like that.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
metafiction at best.
Yeah, because you've got like the normal writing from the first guy that gets slowly crazier, and then you've got like the red writing of the annotations of the dude who's coming back through, and he's slowly going crazier. But as you get into one of the later chapters, there's a section where the original guy who was doing all of the investigative work basically starts drawing Space Marines. And it's never directly tied that, yes, this means that fantasy is just, in the 40k universe and disconnected from the Imperium, but it also could be.
Not only does the guy start hallucinating Space Marines, he has a couple page section, where he literally writes out the 13 Black Crusades from the perspective of a guy going completely buggered mental.
And who
in
has no
fantasy.
concept of the technology that he's hallucinating either.
I love it.
It's fantastic. It is one of the best brain scrambling pieces of media to come out of the Black Library. I have a hard copy on my shelf behind me. I love it. It's a wonderful book, and that's one wonderful thing about
segueing
dark matter.
back to dark matter.
Yeah, you could do that there as well. Shoal, the setting that we're writing, that could be the case.
Could be in dark matter.
One of the things that we discussed last week when we were doing our world building was just how grand in scope we wanted access for our stories to be with this setting. Did we want it to be the people of Shoal already had interstellar travel or not yet? Did we have near space? Did we not? Was space going to be completely analogous to real life, or was it going to be a bit wibbly wobbly, timey wimey? So you get all these fun things going on, and to have a rule set to put something like that onto tabletop, the way you can just plug and play, is really, really cool.
Okay.
But go on.
Yeah.
To sort of segue into the next thing that I think makes dark matter really cool and will benefit your story as well as any others told there, is you have to have some kind of limiters to enable stories to work. If you give people a completely free and open playground where you can do anything that you want, you end up with the child in a candy shop. Too much choice, they can't make a decision and just burst into tears.
Which is why I want to limit this to just one sector of the galaxy.
I think that's a really good idea. But what I like is that you've also got these things inherently built in, even if you are looking at large scale, which in terms of dark matter is the black. Space is really big and most of it has nothing in it. And crossing those great big gaps of nothing in it is a challenge.
Yeah,
I really like that's fundamentally built into the setting.
The ships in dark matter are equipped with dark matter engines, which are essentially pieces of black holes, or like crystallized black holes, void crystals, which you pump energy into and create a wormhole, a mini maw, and zip through, and various dark matter engines get you further. But navigating the black without a maw station like that can have consequences. You can either hit the spot you want to go, cool beans. You can have a near miss, which you might have to hard burn for a couple of days to get to your location. You can jump in the completely opposite direction, or you can have a translation error. You can fuck up your jump and you damage the ship.
And that's before we get into the space bugs people eat to make them better at predicting what's happening with the jumps. But we're not going to go into detail with that. You guys need to pick up this setting. It's really cool.
Yes, spice melange is sentient space bugs.
Yes.
La cucaracha, la cucaracha.
So,
they scream in pain and terror every time you jump into the void.
Then now we're definitely going very 40k. But I do love that you've got these grand scale hurdles, which is important for a setting. We've started putting some of that into place in the setting we're building last week. But I think that's also really important for both a campaign or an individual story. You need a grand scale hurdle. It doesn't necessarily have to be a hurdle that has to be overcome, but it's something there that puts a roadblock in the way of what you're trying to do.
So in a treasure hunting campaign, obvious hurdles are other treasure hunting parties.
Yes.
And then, as I've alluded to at the beginning, possibly a pursuit of the big bad boogeyman of the setting.
Yep. And then you add in other complications that can be grand scale. If this is a treasure that's been out there for a long time.
Property rights.
Yep.
Is there a settlement on top of the location?
Some enormous giant Leviathan ate it. How are you going to get that back? There's all sorts of grand scale hurdles you can put in, and some of them are there to be overcome. Some of them are repetitive.
Have you zipped through the bestiary at all?
I have had a brief glance, yes, and there's some cool stuff in there.
Hilarious. Oh, I just had an idea. One of the locations is on the back of a world turtle.
There you go. That's very important. You should definitely do that.
The Great Atuan.
So you've got that as a grand scale hurdle, and another grand scale hurdle that the setting has is dead magic zones, which Doctor Who already touched on, with the sorry, not the halflings, the gnomes, with using science to overcome problems, because magic just doesn't work in some areas, and when you have a system where people are trying to do things with one set of technology that's expected to work, and then it just suddenly doesn't, how do you overcome that hurdle?
Absolutely. And a note about dead magic zones, really quick, now that we're on this subject. So he wrote in that the universe is expanding,
Yep.
and the field of magic isn't necessarily expanding alongside it. So random dead magic zones pop up and then disappear or move around. But the expansion of the universe, or the expansion of magic, is not keeping up with the expansion of the universe.
Excellent. Excellent. That gives you a lot of space and scope for if you're doing those grander campaigns where you're going all over the galaxy, or the universe, if you're going out that far, that you've got these extra things that you can bring in. I definitely think that for your campaign, having that crop up at some point would be a really interesting thing to see your players work their way around. So I would definitely see if you can figure out a way to work in at least one dead magic zone.
No, absolutely.
Because that's going to turn everything, especially if you save it for like sort of the third quarter of the story. Your characters have had their initial arc, they've had some initial successes, they've overcome some initial trials and tribulations, they're comfortable in their characters, they've begun building things into okay, I'm stable, I'm established, my character does this, this, and this, I play off of this character and this character best. We know what we're doing, we're getting somewhere, and oh crap,
and
everything
why don't
we
my
thought
spells work?
Yes, everything we thought we knew and could rely on has now gone out of the window. How do we problem solve that? I think that's always a really good challenge to throw to players in a campaign, and dead magic zones are a great way of doing that.
Absolutely.
Another thing I pulled out of the setting that you mentioned earlier, and I'm probably going to pronounce this differently. Yes, go on.
Can I real quick interject before you skip, because Grimos just saw something or said something that sparked the brain meat just a
Go
little
for
bit,
it.
because you were talking about the hazard of dead magic zones, and he's like, it'll be like a minefield in a sense. So one of the features of the setting, you've got the goblinoid races have been fighting in what's called the war
Yes.
zone for an incredibly long
So
time. And you want to explain it?
yes. So the war zone was originally orc territory, and orcs, as soon as they discovered arcane warheads in setting nuclear devices, basically,
Yeah,
um,
instead of radiation though.
they create localized dead magic zones as part of their explosion. And the orcs basically shattered all of their worlds a la Tuchanka from Mass Effect with these warheads, and kind of became a semi-nomadic race. And then we're just like, all right, that kind of sucks. Let's work on our ships. Um, and so now the orcs are like a mechanic race working on their rides, air quotes as they call them. So imagine imagine a spaceship with massive mufflers and flames painted on the side, uh, belching smoke
Megas
and
XLR, the
eh,
spaceship.
belching smoke, and they are fueled not by magic but by gasoline. Their ships are powered by internal combustion engines.
The th- the
And
yeah.
so he created these orcs because historically and controversially, orcs have been seen and associated with, shall we say, the less savory racial connotations in society. Um, so he created them as tinkerers and mechanics who, lost their world. So now all the goblinoids, like the kobolds and the goblins and
The
various other
bugbears.
various other um I hate to use the word vermin, but the generic kind of like, oh, there's a tribe of X out in the woods. They're harassing the village. Go exterminate them, brave adventurers. They're fighting over planetoids and asteroid belts now in
And
the
of
war
course,
zone. And the war zone overlaps with dwarven territory. And so the dwarves are very upset at all of these goblinoid characters.
those asteroid belts and, planetoids and other chunks of space scrap that they've bombed out of existence have just dead magic areas just liberally
Yeah,
sprinkled
yeah,
throughout because they just keep using magical nukes on each other over
yeah,
and over and
no.
over
The war
again.
zone is just pocketed with dead magic
I
zones.
felt it might be worth letting people see what the
Oh yeah,
map looks
no.
like for this, because this is a very well thought out and pretty book. It's a very nice book.
If you will notice in the bottom middle, though, what does that one little dot say?
That is an enormous gnomish flotilla down there.
No,
No.
about
Shoal.
northwest of that,
Ah, yes. Here.
I think that's northeast.
northeast. Yeah. Earth exists in this setting.
And we're just stuck in a dead
We
magic
are
zone.
visited by the amoeboids.
So yes, this setting has a lot going for it. I really like it.
Urban warfare, but worse. Yeah, asteroid combat would be horrible.
Yes.
One of the mechanics is these goblinoid races, the kobolds and everything, have electronic nets that they string up between asteroids that actually capture ships.
That is fabulous. We must never tell Lillian. That's the sort of thing she'd love.
Indeed.
All right, let me bring Scrivener back up. Boop. There we go. And then actually look at it on my screen so I can see what we're doing.
The next thing that you are going to horribly mispronounce.
I'm going to pronounce it the way it's pronounced in the country I grew up in. Sue me. So you've got this thing called the Sepulchre Star, and it is effectively orbiting in tandem with a black hole.
It has been orbiting and quote unquote being eaten by the black hole for a couple million years, which is a couple million years longer than it should have survived.
It also might have an old one in it or some other
No, it
phenomenal
definitely
thing.
does have some sort of divine, air quotes, we don't know, presence in it, which is probably why it survived being eaten by the black hole for so long.
It's
So
Azathoth.
there is in universe, there is a belief that the being imprisoned, for lack of a better word, in the Sepulchre Star is a being Castus has redeemed a pet.
We will do some pet redeems before stream ends because I'm going to send Aiden into the puppy palace and see if he can get murdered.
So a
I'm
being
gonna get mauled.
called Old Un is believed to be imprisoned in the Sepulchre Star. His divine, for lack of a better word, because we don't know, presence is probably what has extended its life around the star. And no one knows what will happen when the star is completely consumed by the black hole. If he will release from prison or will be consumed by the black hole as well. This divine presence is why the Avia Ra went from their territory to conquer the Sepulchre Star, because they believe that every star, every sun is made in the image of what they call the sun above. The Avia Ra are bird-headed Egyptian people who are basically Solaire on steroids.
Praise the sun.
He was. I played an Avia Ra in test setting for this game, and I loved him so much. But they Yeah, praise the sun. Um, and they are fanatical about it. In fact, they almost destroyed the universe over it.
Yeah, that
And that's
sounds
where the
like
Sepulchre Knights
uncontrolled.
came from.
That sounds like
Um,
uncontrolled fanaticism over a not entirely defined concepts tends to go.
so they believe that every star is a reflection of the divine image of the Sepulchre star, the sun above.
Yeah. And I think it's really
Um,
important to have those grand mysteries where you've got
they don't necessarily
go.
they don't necessarily worship Old Un.
Hmm.
They just worship the divine presence of the star as a whole. And people are just like, oh no, Old Un is it? And they're just like, it's the sun above you, heretic.
So you've touched on why these grand mysteries are always a great thing for both settings and for stories. Is it allows you to have people who perceive because it's not set in stone of it's definitively this and this is definitively what will happen, and then A will go to B will go to C, and then eventually you get all the way to Z and that's it. When you have that set out in stone, it can really limit creativity. So we're at the opposite end of the spectrum from where we were earlier, where now we want people to have the freedom because that also helps to generate stories. You've got one group who believes that it's this thing and it's heretical if you're not. You can have other people who perhaps believe this thing and that, depending on where you are in the galaxy, you can't say that or it's going to be a problem. People who derive their own personal meaning from it, people who want to understand it on a more scientific level. It's all people engaging with this grand thing, but from different directions.
Lady Red, can you please go back to the book?
I certainly can. What would we like to look
and
at in the book?
Scroll down a couple of pages to the 2-page spread.
Right here?
Right here. This is the sun above. That is the black hole at the center of the galaxy, and that is Sepulchre Station.
Have I mentioned that I really like the art in this book?
That station is split between the religious capital of the Avia Ra and the central station of the Sepulchre Knights. The Sepulchre Knights said, all right, you can have the station, but we have half because we need to keep you guys in check.
Very sensible. And then there's another setting where you could have multiple stories without ever leaving that station.
Absolutely. No, I love this station. It's literally a pyramid.
It's fantastic. The shape theory
Kirby,
on that is a wonderful piece of art.
So Kirby, the gentleman who my friend contracted for most of the art direction of this book, is a British gentleman. And he has an amazing artistic sense.
Absolutely. I love all of the artwork I've seen in this book, and it's brilliant. It's very evocative and thematic, and excellent shape language, excellent color theory. But we're not here for me to go off on an art rant. We're on a writing rants. Writing rants.
I'm gonna just make the comment that time is flying because we're 50 minutes in already.
I know we haven't got to the section that we really should be at, but that's fine because
which is us trying to help him write.
We're going to push this to almost a half hour, so it'll be fine.
And this might be a multiple episode thing. Which, if you'll have me, I'd love it. But I'm not going to demand your time.
I do know we can't next week because I have something else planned for next week. But for other weeks after that, I'm sure we can fit things in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would love to come back and just gush about dark matter.
So you've already touched on these guys, who I was calling the Wrath, and that's incorrect. But what stuck out to me about them is how useful they are in terms of fulfilling the helpful role for campaigns for universal BBEG. Universal bad guys that you can... It's always a great thing for sort of starting things out. And I'm talking here specifically for storytelling for tabletop RPGs. Because you know you're going to have... Yeah, you're going to have multiple people sitting down at your table who all look at character creation and what they want to do and what they're here for slightly differently. You're all trying to get on the same page. You start the game up. You're trying to figure out, how we're going to synergize, what works for all of us, what makes us all have the most fun, what's our pace of getting through the storyline. Where do we begin with delving into this new setting? And sometimes that starts as simple as, like you were saying earlier, brave adventurer, we've been raided by kobolds, please go into the woods and deal with them. Kobolds are a very easy universal go and pick on them guys, and then you sort of build
Yes.
up to other things. And I feel like these
Yeah.
guys on a space scale are an excellent representative of that. And you could run the whole gamut of, that there's an individual issue all the way up to, oh god, there's a flotilla headed this way.
I mean, they just as far as writing goes, not even for tabletop RPGs exclusively, but having a antagonistic entity that is just shorthand for the bad guys that everybody can get behind going up against, or everybody can get behind as being the antagonist, makes a lot of sense because these guys remind me of the Reavers from Firefly, for one,
Uh,
to stay in the sci-fi genre, at least as far as the fact that they're the boogeyman that appears out of nowhere, just spoils everything in their path, and then disappears all over again.
yeah,
But like
except
what you're
instead of like ripping your ship to parts, ripping your ship to shreds to steal all of your parts, they rip you to shreds and steal your body.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll get to the movie reference I alluded to earlier, but for the narrative shorthand, it's the equivalent to using, say, the Nazis in a Indiana Jones flick, or any of the many games like Wolfenstein. They are universally easily identified as the bad guy. It's why having in D&D, usually if you want a everybody can get behind beating up this enemy, you go with infernal or undead.
Absolutely.
Devils, demons, or skeletons, and everybody goes, "Yeah, I could get behind beating them up." When you look at Cold War fiction, it's always, the KGB, because whenever you're dealing with a Western audience, they know that is shorthand for they're the bad guy. So every James Bond flick that ever took place during the Cold War, you can usually tell that if it's going to deal with the Russians, they're going to be in an antagonistic, or at least, not quite friendly fashion for the
Oh yeah.
Bond flicks that were more subverting the trope.
No, yeah, no, yeah.
And then,
It's definitely
yeah,
beneficial to have a defined bad guy. Not necessarily everything about him is defined, but like this is the boogeyman. This is something everyone universally is squiffy about.
yeah. And they remind me, the Roth, I think that's what
Growth.
they're called. Roth. Okay. These things remind me of a movie called Skyline. You ever seen it?
No, never heard of
I
Oh,
it.
this
I
movie. Very
want
relevant. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I wonder if your buddy who developed this setting has, because the whole premise of Skyline, it's an alien invasion kind of movie where it's, celebration happening in, I think it's Los Angeles, by a bunch of dudes. It's a movie where honestly I was glad when each of the cast got killed off because they're all just douchebags. But the thing that they discover about a third to a half of the way through the movie is the aliens that are just steamrolling everything in their path. It opens up with the guy looks out the window and he sees the columns of light and people are entranced by it and marching into them and then getting sucked up
Oh,
into the UFOs.
oh, like a bug zapper.
No, because they're getting sucked into the UFOs and kidnapped. And then after the mass kidnapping, then the aliens actually get boots on ground and start yoinking people. When they finally manage to take down one of the aliens that's chasing them by ramming it with a car,
Hmm.
they discover that it's powered by a brain, and the on on emergency power, it grabs a dude and basically plucks his brain out and sockets it back in and self repairs. using the dude's brain as a power source, and that becomes the big reveal, is that they're harvesting mankind because brains are being used as batteries.
Yeah, yes, that is essentially what the Roth are, except they also
Yeah, there's a bit less torture in Skyline, but the Roth have clearly seen some
yes,
Dark Eldar in their time and got some inspiration. Carry on.
absolutely. So, um,
All right. So to try and actually be useful to you, the section that I wanted to get to, and I'm going to do this so that we can actually see it on stream.
and the banner was hiding right there.
Yes, and I was hiding this on purpose. So, so in terms of some extant works to study that I think will allow you, would be good to have a look at for helping to get the brainstorming for ideas, and hopefully this is where chat can jump in and give us some ideas as well. I've picked out Pirates of Dark Water, Borderlands series, Mad Max, Indiana Jones, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I am certain that multiples of these have inspired some of the stuff in this setting already.
But Borderlands, yes. In fact, like the vault map from one of those games is kind of like just the star system unfolds and then it's like pop, 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 pop. Oh, it's a treasure map.
Yep. The end of
Max, Mad Max, maybe not necessarily, but
I'll come back to why I brought that up when we get down to
Indiana
it.
Jones. Indiana Jones kind of bombastic treasure hunt adventure thriller is kind of like the vibe that I want to have for the campaign, and then Hitchhikers is just Douglas Adams was a genius.
Yes.
So at that point, if that's the vibe you're going for, Indy Jones, take a look at the Uncharted series. The early entries into Uncharted were very much trying to capture the Indiana Jones mood in video game format.
What I thought might be quite helpful
I
to
never
do.
played Uncharted.
Neither have I, which is why it's not on this list, because I can't comment authoritatively and be useful as a result. But Aiden is right, they would be a good resource to look at. The reason I pulled these up is because I know a little bit about each of these, and I thought what might be helpful is to look at what made each of these things good and compelling and memorable, and what things they did wrong, which would be the pitfalls to avoid in building your own campaign. Does that sound like that would be of any use?
Absolutely.
So, did you ever watch Pirates of Dark Water when you were younger?
No, I did not.
Anybody in chat remember Pirates of Dark Water? Let's have a look if chat knows what I'm talking about.
As an aside,
yes,
Pip is growling in his sleep.
we'll give chat a minute and see if any of them know what I'm talking about. Don't think so. Yes. Okay, there's a couple of people here who were children of excellent taste. Vaguely. Okay, so Pirates of Dark Water was a cartoon in the early 90s, if I remember correctly, that was
91 to 93.
It was one of the most evocative cartoons I remember watching as a kid because it used a very saturated color palette.
That's why I was one when this came out.
We are not going to talk about how old I was. But what was great about Pirates of Dark Water is it was, I won't say it was grim, although there was a slight sort of, it was childhood grim, if that makes sense.
No. There's 40K grim darkness, and then there's child grim darkness, which is introducing kids softly to the concept of the big bad things that go bump in the night.
Yep.
And then you get the Black Cauldron, which just rips the Band-Aid off and traumatizes you.
Well, Pirates of Dark Water was one of those series that knew how to toe the line of things that would feel threatening and scary to a child without being too scary. And I remember sort of these key moments from my youth where you sort of go too far with things like the Black Cauldron could do that, Watership Down with that one scene could do that. But then you had the things that were really good and kind of set you up to understand the joy of scary things. And that would be like, oh God, his name slipped my mind now. I'm going to kick myself for this later. But the bad guy from Flight of Dragons, the Pirate Lord Bloth from Pirates of Dark Water was kind of scary. scary. The Skeksis from Dark Crystal could be kind of scary, but they never pushed it so far that you didn't want to watch and it was too scary. It was just the right level. And Pirates of Dark Water had that. It had that threat in it. And the concept of Pirates of Dark Water, if you have not watched it, is you are following you are following this young lad called Ren. He's your main character, and he is off to find the 13 treasures of rule to save the planet from dark water, which is this black water in the oceans that just swallows things whole. And he's off on these adventures to find the 13 treasures of rule, to reunite them and save the world, and the pirate captain Bloth is chasing him to try and steal them from him. Through this very simple situation, you've got multiple characters that get added in with their own drives, their own moralities, and of course that's the great thing about playing around with pirates and treasure hunters is you don't have to play with clean moralities. You can have people who are on the same team working together who very much have their own agendas.
Voiced by Tim Curry.
Yes.
Holy shit.
Yes. Pirates of Darkwater had an excellent pedigree, and one of the reasons it failed was that it was very ambitious for its time, which is sad because it was a great series with some really great characters in it. So I think that would be a great thing to have a look at for the interplay of the characters, for the concepts that are brought forward into it. And just like Dark Matter, it was a very thematically strong, evocative setting. The colours
Studio
were very bold.
Madhouse helped
Yes.
with this. Interesting.
Yes. Yes,
Oh,
never-ending
this-
story,
this-
Darkness. That's a great way of
This
putting it, Castus.
has pedigree.
Yes.
Talking about different treasure hunters and the advantage of being able to be morally versatile with them. Again, I'm thinking
Oh yeah,
Indiana Jones.
there's no good in
Well, I mean-
this. There's going to be like no good guys in this setting. Like everybody wants to get rich
I mean,
for
even if,
various reasons, but yeah.
even if you have good guys, they don't necessarily have to be nice guys. Like looking
Just because you're a
at,
bad guy doesn't mean you have to
are-
be bad guy.
Yup. Because I mean, Indiana Jones, going back to the Indiana Jones franchise, at the opening of Last Crusade, he basically stows away on board a rich dude's frickin' boat and proceeds to appropriate his legally owned property because it belongs in a museum, culminating in the dude and all hands on the ship being killed because the ship explodes. But at the same time, you never really think that Indiana Jones is a bad guy. He's sometimes questionable, but he always seems to do mostly the right thing.
So I see.
And then
you're
there's
writing
Lara
Lady Red.
Croft.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Oh,
there's
God.
Lara Croft.
Yeah. Jesus Christ.
Oh, there's dinosaurs
so-
in that there cave.
Yes,
Shame.
There were dinosaurs in that cave.
Get Crow on here to talk about that.
Lots of character interplay. Character stories kind of didn't detract from the overall story, but it seems like its failing was it was episodic.
So
way too episodic.
It suffered from 80s, 90s cartoon
Syndication.
syndrome. Exactly. They knew what the setting was. They knew what the stakes were. They didn't have an overarching plot they intended the characters to progress along to reach the very, very, very important 2 words that every single story needs to have. The end. Correct.
Yep.
So that was where Pirates of Darkwater fell down. I mean, there's a lot more that goes into it that's to do with it being a cartoon that's not relevant to our discussion today. It was over budget. It was always delivered late, I seem to recall. So that there was a lot more
Cost
going on.
$500,000 per episode, according to the wiki.
Yeah, but those are the things that are
90s money.
relevant. Yes. So you can see the problems.
Jeez.
Lara Croft, aka the patron saint of the British Museum.
No, the British Museum at least remembered to bring some things back and let other people have access to them. The British Museum didn't just blow them all up. Anyway.
Moving on to Borderlands.
Yeah, let's move on to Borderlands. So,
Indeed.
what I really should have done is put Borderlands and Mad Max the opposite way round, because Borderlands wouldn't exist if Mad Max didn't exist. But we'll worry about that in a minute.
absolutely. No, Borderlands is Max in space.
So you're obviously familiar with Borderlands. I imagine a lot of people
I
are.
love the video games. Oh my god.
The first two
love
are
them.
amazing, and I absolutely love them. Even though 2 was
3
just a
has
meme
its
generator, 2 was just the video game, but that was because
Absolutely.
it was so
It
well
was
written for the
good.
time.
It was love.
Yes.
Borderlands 2 was a passion project for fans of the first, made by fans who wanted to have fun.
Yes. And that is the key
And
thing, is
fun
that
first.
Borderlands, its biggest thing that makes the good Borderlands games good is they were fun. And ultimately, when you're sitting down at a table to play tabletop RPGs, people should be
Fun.
there for fun. It should not be a chore. It shouldn't be that one
All
person
right,
is having to
we're
carry
wrapping up
everything.
for today. Did everybody have fun? And if everybody says yes, you did your job.
Yes. And I think one of the things that made Borderlands really fun was you are limited to, in the initial game, you've got your 4 characters. And each of them has the things that they're good at, the things that they specialize in. And although you can do a little bit of everything with a little bit of everyone, you're not restricted from certain guns or anything like that by who you're playing. You had the things that they were supposed to be mechanically good at that was reflected that was reflected in the personalities that you saw, but those personalities weren't pushed so hard that they overpowered what you were there for. And the real character of Borderlands that sold the first game and then proceeded to make the second game good, even though you were bringing in new characters and new concepts and retconning a few things.
Yeah,
The main character of Borderlands is Pandora.
absolutely. It's the world is as much a character living in it.
Yes.
When you're coming up with a tabletop RPG or trying to build a story and setting for that, or maybe not setting because we've got the setting, but a story in that setting, that is honestly one of the most important things
So,
as a writer, is to remember
this
that you're not writing the main characters.
so the to kind of harp on this just a little bit as we continue and try to wrap up this section so we can get on with Shoal. Um, this sector of the galaxy, I want to have like a kind of Pandora-esque feel, a little Wild Westy, all of the planets kind of around that similar-ish vibe. Like the main Hearth station, I want to be somewhat analogous to a prospecting Wild West saloon. Not like a pastoral British inn, but like someone playing on the piano, rowdy characters, ladies of the night calling from the upper balconies, and just people being rude, crude, and out to find gold.
Yeah, which in terms of what you're intending to do with your story is thematically on brand and will enable your players, when you all sit down, to all get your sort of heads into the same space. You've got a lot of creative shorthand going on with that allows people to be in the right focus for then expanding that out into what you're all here for. So that's a really great idea. And I think Borderlands is a great thing to draw from that, in terms of, I want the setting to be living and breathing. I want to give the characters the opportunity to do the things that they want to do, but also make use of the things that they're specifically good at without any one thing being too much pressure in one direction or the other. Of course,
Absolutely.
The biggest thing that we have to remember with Borderlands that it got wrong, because it was a treasure hunting story,
I know where
that's
this is
the
going.
problem.
Yep.
The reveal was not worth the effort, which in itself was a hilarious joke. But if you've asked people to sit down for, months on end, once a week,
It's the
walking
vault.
through a story,
Treasures beyond your wildest imagination. Oh no, it's a giant tentacle monster. Shoot it in its
Yes.
eyeballs.
which is hilarious. but it's also probably going to get you, you know, covered in soda and whatever else the people at the table can throw at you, and it might take you some time to convince them to come back. So be wary
the
of
treasure
that.
needs to be a treasure.
When you're working towards these critical moments of, okay, you found one of the treasures that you're looking for, or the treasure that you found has a marking you weren't expecting on it, which in itself could be a red herring. We were talking earlier about this idea of, you know, grand mysteries that aren't explained and that people can have different ideas about them. I mean, if they find a treasure and it's got Un's mark carved into it, well, what does that mean? Or was it just that somebody who happened to have the treasure at one point just doodled it on there? You know, you can play with that sort of thing, but when you get to these key moments where you're trying to reward your players, make sure they walk away with a sense of reward, not that they feel like that this has been at their expense.
Not a aha, gotcha, funny joke.
Which is where I comment to what Ed Gauss is saying. I get that that was part of the message that they were going for, but they didn't really make that point. Like, they dropped it on you, and it's only after the fact that they kind of made that's what the meaning was.
The vault isn't full of treasure. It's an alien prison.
Yeah, and after 40 plus hours of looter shooter goodness, and it's just, shoot this big monster, that is a letdown for what you've been building up to through it. Thematically, yes, it's good. It is a funny joke of, by the way, it's just a big tentacle monster. And, you know, after you've had some time to calm down, that's funny too.
The final vault also had a giant monster, but at least you got tons of good loot at the end of it.
Yeah.
And more importantly, and this is what I was really alluding to, is they set the expectations that that's what you were going to get.
Yes, it's the expectation that makes the difference.
Yeah. I didn't see it as a joke either, Gauss, but the fact that they didn't build up to it, they just kind of dropped it on your plate and then
I
said
see
nothing.
it as a joke in the meta sense.
Yes.
Not in terms of what the story's telling you in the story while you're there, but looking at it from the outside, where you've gone through all of this and then it's just a big tentacle monster to shoot at the end. And to me, that is just kind of funny. But you're right, it's not the in story idea. So for Mad Max, of course, is the other side of Borderlands. It's the serious side of what Borderlands is. The concept of people who don't have a stable life and the things and the resources that they need, and sort of if you're looking at treasure hunting in terms of Mad Max, depending on which movie you're looking at, it's water, it's gasoline, it's companionship,
vehicles.
It's vehicles are consistent, mental, just dealing with your mental health problems. You've got a whole
therapy,
sort of things.
the treasure we all needed.
Yeah, you've got all these sort of things that people are seeking in the Mad Max movies as you go through. And one of the strong suits of Mad Max 2 is that Max says a sum total of 16 lines, and it's still a great movie. And one of those lines is the same 3 times, if I remember correctly. So Mad Max is if you're sort of looking things from a more sort of serious side, and if you wanted to dig into a more almost philosophical, thematic thing with it, which I don't think is necessarily going to fit what you're looking to do. But what I really like about Mad Max that I think would play well for building a treasure hunting campaign and would have some good points to pull from is, again, you've got this very thematic setting. If we look at Fury Road specifically, the soundscape that goes along with that and the use of sound in campaigns to really build things can be excellent. And I'll write a lot of these notes down after stream and send all this to you.
Oh, yes, please.
And also just, it's another example of that interplay of characters, because you've got people who've all come together. I'm going to specifically draw from Fury Road here. You've got Max, who's there with his own particular goal that he has in mind, and his goal sort of changes the most over the course of the story. You've got Furiosa, who's got a specific thing that she's trying to do. You've got the wives are there, and they've got a specific thing that they're hoping to do. And then, of course, you've got Nux, what he's hoping to do. And you've got the antagonist chasing element in terms of Immortan Joe and the War Boys with their own specific things that they're trying to do. And the interplay of those is what allows the story to happen. And you've got multiple sort of factions within factions in Fury Road, because the bullet farmer does not necessarily get along with Immortan Joe, even though he's following him. And the other great thing about Fury Road is there's a lot of lore there to be uncovered if you look beyond just what's in the movie. For example, the backstory of the Doof Warrior, not explored in the movie, is explored in a comic. But it's clear that legacy existed before Fury Road was made.
One of my one of the YouTube channels that I watch made a video about Mad Max and the guy playing the flaming guitar on the war rig, and is just like, yeah, like the movie doesn't say what those things mean, but everyone kind of understands that in universe, like the sounds that he's making and the flames that he's shooting mean certain things to the convoy, like turn here, attack there.
Yep. And then if you get really into it because you really enjoyed the story and you want to know more, and that's something that sort of piques your interest, you pick up the comic and you learn that, oh yeah, the reason he looks like that is he's wearing the skin of his dead mother on his face. No allusion to that whatsoever in the movie, because it doesn't need to be there. It's not part of the movie's story, but it is part of the greater universe, and that lore existed before Fury Road was
Ed
made.
Gein.
And that was the thing I was going to say is the big takeaway from Mad Max from a storytelling perspective. There's a certain amount of awareness you need about when you're putting in too much. Because one of the big things about Mad Max is it's a very minimalist story in even the original Mad Max movies. It's a very minimalist story in the good ones. Mad Max 2, Road Warrior. You get told pretty much all you need to know straight up. You don't have to go into too much depth as to the motivation for the bad guys, because they're the bad guys. Their actions and immediate introduction sets the tone.
So it's like for treasure hunting, it's like they're rival treasure hunters. They
Yeah.
also want to get rich. The
Let's-
Roth are the Roth. They're big, bad, and evil. They might be after what you're finding.
Yep, but
Yeah.
you've
You don't
got
need to
enough
get
scope.
too into it.
Yeah, unless your players decide to try and follow some of those leads, at which point you can then start to build on those things. And that's where you go, okay, well, we're stepping away from the movie for a couple of sessions so that we can go and read the comic, because you guys are interested in that. And that can be a really cool thing to do.
Have the details, but don't necessarily shove it down their throats. Like, you're talking, hey, the rival treasure hunter, their whole goal is to get rich. I mean, and because Indiana Jones is next on the list, like Belloc, they never go into his history with Jones any more than the very surface level of they're rivals and he's screwed Indy over multiple times in the past.
Yeah.
And you
So
don't need to know how he screwed Indy. You just know that he's the bad guy, a rival treasure hunter, and that's how it works. And you use the same logic.
We're approaching half past. So
Yeah, you're
what did
fine
Mad
for
Max
now.
do good? What did they do
So
bad?
I'll write down all the Mad Max stuff that it did good later. We've just discussed them, but I will write out what Mad Max unfortunately does wrong. Is it has a horrible case of cape shit. And by that, what I mean is that
I have never heard this term.
cape stories, and this is something that's sort of come, this is a redism. This is something that comes from my personal philosophies of writing and storytelling and things that my poor friends have to hear me say far too often. One of the reasons that I don't like superhero stories is because superhero stories have a nasty habit, because they're there to make money, of having a really cool story that doesn't respect its audience, because ultimately when they get to the end of the story, they want the characters to be in the same position they were in at the start of the story so that they can tell you the next arc next week. Superman never dies. Batman always finds a way out of whatever the problem is. You don't always get long-term stakes. And Mad Max does have a little bit of an issue with that. Max is constantly losing his car, needs his car back, surviving in the desert, and then leaves at the end despite the bonds that he could possibly have made, because that's what Max does, which is part of his, mental trauma. But he, yes, return to the status quo. Especially when you're writing campaigns, you always want your players to walk away
It
feeling
needs
like
to progress.
yes, they need to walk away feeling like what they just went through and did and the choices they made
It mattered.
Yes, and it might not necessarily always be for the good. It could be that something went horribly wrong, and that just gives you incentive to want to fix it in whatever comes next. But that fixing shouldn't involve, well, let's just put things back to where we started. The events
Indiana
happened.
Jones, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Do you want to hit that one, love? What's great about Indiana Jones as a treasure hunting story? Because Aiden really likes Indiana Jones.
I mean, staple of my childhood right there.
Absolutely.
I mean, the big thing that I've already mentioned is really the biggest thing that you want to keep in mind, because what you're describing that you're wanting to make is a very pulp adventure story.
Absolutely, yes.
Indiana Jones is like the foremost example of that in my mind. It's not the only one. You
No,
could look at
absolutely.
The Mummy, Journey to the Center of the Earth, Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, Van Helsing. All of these movies have kind of the same recurring thing: is they will explain to you enough for you to understand what's going on, and they will not then continue explaining past that point, because once you know everything you need to know to understand what's happening, anything else is just going to take you away from what you're here for, which is the
German. That's why I liked anime instead of cartoons. An actual arc with an end without returning to status quo.
and
That and
boobies.
boobies.
Yep, boobies help. But yeah, I mean, the thing
No,
is,
no, no, yeah,
once you
tight thinking, defined bad guys, and just yeah, this is the world. It's just slightly fantastical
yeah,
because
so
an archaeologist isn't fighting Nazis for the Ark of the Covenant.
I mean,
I'm
there's at least one archaeologist that Indy was at least in part
There
based
was a
on,
guy who
who
did, but yes, that's not the normal career
yeah,
progression.
yeah, it wasn't
no.
for the Ark, but he was fighting Nazis for occult artifacts during the 40s. Not quite as bombastically, but it actually was a thing. Anywho,
It's
so
larger than life.
yeah, I mean,
It,
the
it, it
thing to keep in
is what
mind though,
Indiana Jones did well.
the thing to keep in mind is, for a good pulp story, you have to have a very keen understanding of what is important and what is not important. Don't keep what's not important in your back pocket, so that if the question gets asked, you can then explain it. Like, if your players want to understand a little bit more about a given thing that they've been exposed to, that helps you flesh out the setting and explain to them, more of what they're interested in. But you want to keep it tight so that you've got, this is the thing you're after, the objective, whether it's the treasure, or you're trying to get revenge on the bad guy, or this, that, or the other. These are your antagonists. You understand why they're the antagonists. This guy is a less scrupulous treasure hunter who's absolutely willing to fuck you to get his payout. These are the boogeyman monsters that are here to steal your children and
Oh
despoil your
no,
world.
no. One of the things I said earlier is there are various factions that we didn't get
Hmm.
to talk about in Dark Matter. Many of the treasure hunters are going to be contracted by these people.
Yep.
Um,
Have
oh
have
yeah.
enough on the factions that they each feel distinct, and that everybody can identify, okay, this is faction A, this is faction B, and then let the players decide what they want to explore in that. Because, and as Lady Red is typing here, action leads to action leads to action. The downtime you have should be a, moment to breathe in between action, where you just kind of look at what we've done thus far and decide what we do next, and then plunge headlong back into the shenanigans. So
Absolutely.
in Raiders of the Lost Ark, you've got, they found the Ark. Oh, the Nazis just stole the Ark from them. There's the brief bit of downtime where Indy finds Marion in the tent, and it's, quiet. Then they go have the fight at the airplane, and there's the moment of for them to breathe after, when they meet Salah afterwards, and Salah's like, the Ark's on a truck. Cue truck chase scene. They load it onto the boat. They have a couple minutes downtime where everything looks like it's okay. Then the submarine happens, and like, there's enough pacing for you to breathe, but if you're doing pulp, you need to keep the action flowing. Again, this all boils down to trim the fat, keep it lean, and keep it simple so that the players are constantly
Engaged.
doing rather than asking.
Hey, what are we doing next? Instead of hey, what are we doing next? Is bad instead of like, hey, we got to go do blah.
Yes, and that's the
Absolutely.
big thing is they need to have enough information that they can decide we're going to go do this.
Hmm.
But if you give them analysis paralysis, that means you are giving too much information. And it's the same for Indiana Jones. They don't need to tell you more than that initial bit what the Ark of the Covenant is. Indy sets the stakes at the very beginning of the film, and after that, you don't need any more exposition on it because you have your thing, you have your target, you have your opposition, go.
Okay.
So what I've popped
And
down as some of the negatives from Indiana Jones to try and avoid is if you sort of watch the movies back to back to back, they can feel a little bit formulaic in some of the challenges. They always have their like sort of unique elements to them, but you can tell that there was almost sort of a formula that was being moved through of there should be a
Indy does
trap
A,
here. Yeah,
Nazis do B,
exactly.
supporting
Yes.
character does C, and it's resolved by D.
Yes. And you
Yep.
can also get some repetitive character archetypes turning up. This is not just necessarily an indie problem, but can also be part of an issue with the storytelling of the day. You see it in Bond
Absolutely.
movies as well, where you've always got, you know, the sexy glamour girl, the counter agent, etc.,
The quote
etc.
unquote Bond lady.
Yeah, so you just want to
Yep.
make sure you're keeping your players engaged. And that's going to bring me to a comment that was made in chat that goes back to Mad Max that I do want to sort of pull from because it is a very valid point. The people Max helps do not return to the status quo, nor do the people he fights. It's a modern mythology told by people he helped decades later, like how Heracles keeps getting his successes undercut after he moves on to face a new task. That is very true. And I'm not at all trying to say that, you know, the Max stories aren't important. I love Mad Max. I absolutely adore Mad Max. And Fury Road is a brilliant
Max,
movie.
the character doesn't advance, but the world
Yeah,
does.
and what we're talking about here is in terms of for building a TTRPG. If you're building a tabletop setting, you want your characters that are, your players that are sat at the table who are giving you their time, their attention, their effort to move the story forwards. You want them to feel like they're not just returning to tune in next time syndrome. But you are completely right on that analysis of what makes the Max stories important, even beyond the fact that you know that in the next movie, Max is probably going to lose his car. He's going to be in the desert on his own. He's going to meet a new band of misfits. You've got these same things happening again, but that doesn't entirely take away any importance that the story has, especially not from the medium that it's being told in. Yes, and
Yeah,
Anarchic
absolutely.
Doctor, that we did mention that the Uncharted series is good to look at, and you're right, it borrows a lot from indie and follows through the indie formula. Max is a force of nature. That's a very good way of looking at him. He is a vehicle the story happens around as he moves forwards. It's a very good way of looking at it. I'm not going to touch on Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy because it's brilliant, no negative notes.
No, one thing that I love about Hitchhiker's Guide is, if I can say something good
Yeah,
about it
sure.
before we get on to Shoal, is the absolute banality of space.
Yes.
Like he writes it in such a way that space is interesting, but absolutely tedious, bureaucratic, and banal.
Which is
And you're just like, oh my god,
yes.
if in a society with space travel, after like the initial century or so that it is created, it's just gonna get rote and repetitive.
Yes, and I mean,
So
it engenders these very rote and repetitive things that are naturally happening in our own lives as well. I mean, you can hitchhike, you can just, you know, thumb a lift from a passing spaceship. Things get destroyed because a hypersonic bypass needs to be put through. It's just so
so you're
normal.
just saying we stuck out our thumb and some bug-eyed monster said, "Hop in, fellas, I can take you as far as the Basingstoke roundabout."
Yes, I've been to the Basingstoke roundabout.
Well,
It's
the
not
thumb's
worth it.
well, the sub's like an electronic sub-ether device.
So
The roundabout's at Barnard's Star, but otherwise right. And the bug-eyed monster, it's green, yes.
So I'm going to make the observation that what you just described, the banality of space in the setting.
Alien.
Well, I wasn't even going to go with that. I'm going actually back to dark matter with this thought. If you look at dark matter as a setting, one of the things that they comment when they're setting, the tech base for how you've got D&D in space basically is that it expresses that magic items have become incredibly mundane by the standard of everybody who uses them, to the point where everybody has access to blasters, which are basically magic items that, as a D&D party, are holy crap, I can shoot a scorching ray at will as much as I want forever, and I don't have to be a wizard to do it. Whoa! But it's
We were
industrialized.
very careful to balance the guns.
Yeah.
Yes, they use 2 damage dice, but you don't get your damage modifier added to it.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to get at is going back to the thematics of Hitchhiker's Guide and what you said about the banality of space is that, yeah, when you have something that has been produced on an industrial scale, even magic, it becomes mundane to the people in setting because,
Absolutely.
well, everybody has it.
Yeah, and
And
no,
it's a cool
people know you get
explanation.
from point A to point B through a Moss station. They're not enraptured by it. It's just it's the Lincoln Tunnel going into New York City.
Yep. So, yeah. And going to the archetypes bit for the Indy Jones bit, that is its own conversation because that's where we could spend an entire stream talking tropes and how
Yes,
they
why
are not.
tropes are good, why
Yeah.
counteracting tropes are good, when to use which, when to try and avoid tropes entirely. Yes, I could go on for hours about that. Samurai also brought up the point that depending on what you're talking about with Hitchhikers, every version of Hitchhikers is different, which will then lead me into a discussion about Top Cow and how they handled that with the Witchblade Darkness Angelus universe, and that's another stream as well.
Yep.
So, I appreciate your time, Lady Red. You said you're going to
Yeah, I would like to spend the next
you're
45
gonna
minutes on Shoal if we
pretty
can.
this up.
I will.
You're
I
gonna
will
pretty
send you
this
some
up,
notes.
and I appreciate that. If you will have me, I would love to stick around and help chat wrangle for your shoal.
Absolutely. You're very welcome to stay around for Shoal because I'd like to go over what we established last week with you and with chat, and so we can carry on from there. And if you want to come back and talk some more about how your campaign building's going and etc. in the future and dive into some more of this, that would be great too because I really
And
like the setting.
if you have time in the Legion, I'd love to bend an ear as well, not on stream.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Might not be
So
today,
I
but
gotta
I'm sure we can do that.
Now
I
that
gotta
we've
take a
got the.
bio.
You go
So
for
I
that.
will let you guys get started on Shoal.
Fair.
Okay, let's move over to Shoal.
Shoal.
Shoal. So last week we got a whole lot of world building done, which was really, really great. There's probably some people here who aren't familiar with Shoal, and that's going to be fun. This is going to be a great stream for getting into that. We started last week looking at the very foundational elements of world building. The way that I like to approach world building is you start with literally the world, whether you're looking at a universe, a galaxy, a particular planet, just a country, but the minutiae of the foundations that everything is built on, because one, it will give stability to everything you build on top of it later, and two, you will be amazed at how many story elements and potential plot points and MacGuffins and etc. that you might need later on when you're actually telling your stories for your characters turn up from the fact that you had to try and figure out exactly how long a day cycle was going to be. So that's what we started on last week, and I've taken the time to try and write out in a little bit more long form what those notes led to, and by next week I should have this all in a document that you guys can freely access and read, so that you just have this information there should you want to look at it, especially as by the end of the year in November, which is novel writing month, I would love for people who are interested to write some stories based on Shoal. So I'm
And
going to
that
do.
was a good bio. I'm back.
I'm going to do a very brief read through of everything that we established last week, and then we're going to see if we can get the last of the foundational world building done, which means that next week, when we all gather, the first hour, we're going to be talking with Crispy about his comic and writing and storytelling for a comic format, and then we're going to move into flora and fauna for Shoal. So that's next week. Pip, are you okay? Pip's just
I will go
dying in
check
the
on him.
background. Don't mind him. But
He
for
is
now,
honking.
we're going to finish this bit off. So we've got our introduction. Far out in the distant reaches of space, 9 planets ring a blazing star amid the cold reaches of the ever-expanding edge of the universe. This is Mern, and its 9 stellar companions all bear names that come not from a planet careening on the endless loops of time around the pulsing body, but from a moon, whose people observe it all from the depths of a deep, dark ocean. Life, where physics meets the unknown, takes on strange forms. For the people of Shoal, it also begets strange technology. Shoal is where the coral lives. Shoal is where the titans are grown. And that's, of course, where we're going to move into our mecha when we get to that point. So, place in the universe. What we established last week was...
Thank you for following, Bakasura.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. And we've got some more pets. I am going to throw Aiden into the puppy palace shortly, I promise.
Yeet.
Yes, we are doing some Crispy next week. We might also look at pulling in some people from the Orcs at some point, because yes, I am aware of Bold, but we're stealing Crispy next week. All right, place in the universe. Mern's system lurks on the outer edges of the universe, awash in the eddies of expanding potential that perhaps explains some of its unique flora and fauna and geology. The star takes its name from the people of Shoal, one of 8 moons orbiting a gas giant within the Goldilocks zone of Mern's light. In total, 9 planets orbit Mern. The first 4, Shan, Castin, Orost and Dolra, are the usual conglomeration of rock and iron-made terrain, though Dolra is in the process of breaking up. Next is the gas giant Luastra. From a distance, it seems almost a giant pearl due to the heavy white gas that makes up its upper atmosphere. Colourful gas eruptions periodically jet out from its lower layers, reaching almost out to its rings of gathered stellar debris, through which some of its moons travel. Beyond Luastra, another terrestrial world, Chasic, spins a complex orbit. It is sandwiched between Luastra and a second gas giant, Tomb. Completing the stellar siblings, the terrestrial world Seld hides behind Tomb's girth and just in front of the system's only ice giant, Sein. For all its unique makeup of worlds and features, Mern is a relatively quiet system. Interstellar travel and vast space constructions have yet to dominate the system, in no small part due to the vast Van Allen belts around the gas giants. These large radiation-laden belts, held in place by immense magnetospheres, make space travel a complex risk, but one which the people of Shoal have just begun to explore and overcome. So that was all of those notes we took last week on how many planets should there be, what kind should they be, and which one are we naming after Wide Tom.
It's okay, and it's okay, Lady Red. English is a difficult language to speak sometimes.
It is, and it's not my first language. Bad English is my first language. So we know that our setting is predominantly going to focus on Shoal itself, which is an ocean world. In terms of known space, Shoal is equivalent in mass to Earth. It's mid-sized among Luastra's moons, with 3 siblings orbiting still further out. Due to its position in the moon hierarchy, as well as the immense gravitational forces enacted on it by its host planet, Shoal is a majority an ocean world whose tides are subject to the complex weave of orbiting bodies it's part of. Some of its oceans are below freezing, kept liquid only by the forces in play in a high saline content. Other oceans become almost temperate, where Luastra's pull on the bedrock creates shallower waters over volcanically active zones. Other fascinating elements of Shoal's geology come from its orbital path. At apogee, Shoal passes far enough from Luastra to enter its debris fields and the golden rings of Lua. The result is that partway through every year, Shoal is bombarded by a brilliant series of meteor showers through its atmosphere that can range from the purely aesthetic to imminently lethal to life in impact zones.
I see feats.
You do see feats. And before we move on to the next section, which I will need some of chat's help with, we do have an Aiden in the puppy palace, seeing if the babies would like to come out and say hi and deliver some pets. I know we've had at least 2 redeems.
Could I please make a comment about tides?
Go for it.
Um, are you familiar at all with the story of Destiny?
No.
So one of the one of the enemy races is called the Hive, and they
Mhm.
lived on they lived millions of years ago on on an ocean world with various islands orbiting a either orbiting or inside of a gas giant. Look at a puppy.
This is
And
Lupa.
there were various moons and things various moons and planetoids orbiting this gas giant.
Mhm.
And one of the things that that the pre-hive race was worried about was what was called the God wave,
Mhm.
where all of the planetoids and gravitational forces lined up in such a way that it was just one massive tidal wave. So
Wow.
so it's like if we are living on a moon subject to gravitational forces of not only the gas giant we are orbiting, but also the other moons and perhaps another gas giant, like occasionally, like the generational mythology of like a massive tidal wave just
Yeah. Makes complete
wrecking
sense.
shit.
We put the 3 moons orbiting further out to try and help ease some of the insane tides that there would be while still letting us have insane tides. But yeah, when we get to the cultural detailing section, that's going to be the sort of thing that's absolutely going to be part of the world building we'll need to consider. I'm going to turn Pup Cam off and back on again briefly because where Aiden held the puppy so close, we've lost all sense of focus.
Or perhaps he could wave his hand at it.
Virgil has my finger.
Oh, we
Aiden,
can't see
we need a
Virgil having
resetting.
your finger because we need to reset the focus. Can you completely cover the lens for a moment and then let it go? Nope, it's not going to do it. It is not going to do it. So yeah, we can only now see PupCam if you hold things up close. So that'll get Aiden doing things while we carry on. Yes,
Look
and
at
living
your
on the surface does
puppies.
make a big difference. You're quite right. And of course, what we're going to be dealing with is we're going to be dealing with species that live underwater. So that's going to be a really interesting dynamic when we get to it.
I mean, tidal waves affect the ocean floor as well.
Yes, they do. But it'll be a slightly different set of considerations, I imagine, that just in terms of...
No, 100%.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right, so the 3 moons beyond Shoal do not yet have names. What do we wish to name these moons? I do have a name for one of the other moons that we have to deal with, but we have currently 6 moons without a name. What do you think they should be, chat?
Ceres. One of them is Ceres.
When we get to the biology next week of flora and fauna and what our races are going to look like, Quinless, that's absolutely a question we're going to have to answer is what does sight look like for the... Are we talking about actual sight? Is it going to be that we use things that fish in the real world use, such as sensing electric, all sorts of different things that we can do. But we need some moon names for now. Oh my goodness, these babies.
Oh, they hungry.
Because they're already latched.
Yep, the babies have already latched, so she can't even lay down at this point. They are voracious
She's
little...
just like, oh no, this is my life.
My poor girl. She'll be weaning them within the next week. Well, you guys have a think on if there's some specific moon names that you want. I'm going to read through this bit so we can continue looking at what we did last week.
Ceres. Oh, Ceres, Brimstone, and Bracken.
Yeah, those are some pretty good names. I like those.
Here,
All
I
right.
was thinking like Flotsam and Jetsam.
We did have, because one of the things that's going to be built into this setting that we've discussed is coral is going to be an important part of the mecha that the races that live on this world use. And
Yeah, I remember your first stream. I was here for that.
we spelled it with the H. We put an H into it last week because that sounded cool and brought in the concept of singing and a choir and the like. So all sorts of great ideas that came in last week.
That's deep. I like that.
Isn't that great?
The psychic choir, a psychic choir. I love that.
Yes. Then we were talking about things in keeping with what we've talked about with dark matter today, of problems and things that you need to put in the way that are issues that have to be overcome or worked around. And there was the concept of having a effectively psionic dead zone around giant coral growths where the majority of coral can be harvested from, but you've got this nasty dead zone outside it that can be an issue for the mecha to pass through, because it severs the connection between them and their pilot, and that there could potentially be a mind sickness that can come from this if you're exposed to it too often. And chat decided that should be called froth, which I think is absolutely fantastic.
Yes, a churning of the waters, and yes. Oh man. Oh, there are going to be so many water puns.
So many things to build in. And I really like that we have a planet named after Wide Tom. Bracken was the other one. We'll use those for now, and unless we decide we want to change them at some point. If one of the moons has a very large crater, call it Oculus. We do still have 3 spare moons that I haven't put names on yet. Oculus would be a good one for that. Let me skip down to here. I'm just going to type this on the bottom.
Ceres cannot escape. Bless her.
Then Grimos also had reef, coral, and shell.
I feel like these might be a little bit too on the nose and might make more sense for on-planet things. I don't think they're bad, but I don't think this is where they might fit the best. So we will come back to that.
It seems a little on the nose. Yeah.
All right, so where have we gotten to? The 3 moons beyond Shoal, Ceres, Brim, and Bracken, balance the worst excesses of its tides. 3 more interior moons form the backbone of much of Shoal's cultures. Because I feel like interior moons that are passing between the planet and the gas giant more often probably will impact cultural and religious ideology. That's why that line's in there.
I love how we're calling this a planet when it itself is also a moon.
Yeah, but it's the size of Earth. Yes, dear.
Yes.
You're being nommed. Oh my goodness, Iden is being murdered.
Oh no!
Murder live on stream.
Oh no, Iden. we shall remember you. I shall play taps.
Finally, Loastra's 8th moon orbits in geosynchronicity with Shoal, with neither ever seeing the other. This is known as the hidden moon or haunted moon, named Tox. It is a desert moon subject to rock swirls from Loastra's influence and suspected by some to be a prison planetoid. And then we just about got to the point where we were looking at the year. So due to orbiting a gas giant, which in turn orbits a large white star, the concept of a year on Shoal is somewhat complicated. In terms of a standard year around the star, not the Tsar, Mern, a year for both Loastra and Shoal is the equivalent to 5 Earth years. So this is known as the grand year. In contrast to this, Shoal also tracks a close year, the amount of time it takes the moon to orbit its host gas giant. This period sits almost precisely equivalent to an Earth year, meaning Shoal experiences 5 close years to every grand year. And that was where we left off last time.
I kind of like that that distinction, but it's just like, how long does it take like the Galilean moons to orbit Jupiter?
I know we went and looked at how long it takes Jupiter to orbit the sun, and then we started looking at other stats and figures, and then all of our brains melted and fell out of our ears. So it was around that point that we stopped last
Also,
week.
this is fantasy. Why is it like this? Because.
Yes, I don't think we need to get down into the specific math that allows this to happen.
We don't need to explain everything. I like that. Speaking of, I see you have days right there. Quinn made a very good comment. What if the moons orbit in a way that it's an ancient way to tell time? When one moon stands at high noon, the second is midnight, and the last is dawn.
I think that would make a lot of sense, is that you sort of map your days by that. So one of the things I was thinking about in the downtime between last week when we were doing this is, for us, a day is a very simple concept. Daytime is when the sun is up, nighttime is when the sun goes down. But if you're orbiting something as large as a gas giant that's a white gas giant, and you've got multiple other moons, some of which are potentially near Earth
Oh.
size, you're going to be looking at a lot of reflected light. So what constitutes day?
And then what happens during a close year when you are behind the gas giant, when the gas giant is in between you and the star?
At which point you're going to have days, in inverted brackets, worth of night.
You're going to, it's going to be, perhaps this is like a culturally significant, like, uh, uh, um, what was I think? I had the words. A culturally significant dark period, where you prepare for the dark year, um, and make your preparations and stay inside, because that's when, I don't know, the leviathans rise from the depths.
Yeah, that would certainly be something we could be doing. There's some things coming in from chat here. Would the reflective light be enough to light up Shoal like day? I doubt it, but it certainly would be noticeable compared to just being in a period of pure darkness when the
do you
gas
know,
giant's in the way.
Astronomical twilight, when the sun has set but it's still bright enough to see?
Yes.
Perhaps it could be something like that.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of complicated stuff going on. So I think in terms of calculating what a day is, I think we can say that a day would be one revolution of Shoal on its own axis. But what that
Basara
means...
has pointed out some of the major Jovian moons, I think what I refer to as the Galilean moons, orbit Jupiter in a 248 Earth day resonance.
And this is when my brain starts dribbling out of my ears, because trying to envision that in my head becomes very difficult.
So yeah, I'm perfectly fine. It's your world, by the way.
Well, we're
but
building
no,
it all together, and we're trying to make it so the most amount of people can work with it as we can. But these are all really important things to discuss.
I do like just being like, yeah, it's a close year and a far year. Deal with it.
Yes, I think in terms of defining the years, that's the easiest way to do it and would make sense culturally. In terms of what a day is, I still think the one revolution on its axis with X number of hours would make sense to define as a day, but that doesn't define in terms of day and night, like in terms of light periods and dark periods. That's going to have to be separate from the concept of a single day, because it's just not going to make sense otherwise. Have you finished being eaten alive by the puppies? You survived?
There was a fight that broke out. Virgil and... Oh my goodness, Virgil is on my foot. Virgil and Freya were throwing hands.
Oh, we've got some more good comments coming in.
Thank you, Night Owl.
What about the planet's ionosphere? Is there something that meddles with radio wave communications, and could we have some fun with that? Very potentially, yes. Very potentially, yes. I mean, the Van Allen belt suggestion last time was a really, really great world-building moment, so I don't have an issue
Aurora
playing with that.
Borealis is going to be fantastic, and I expect possibly some radio, I use the word radioactive, but not like glowing green Hulk gamma radiation, but it's like, you know how we have bioluminescent algae?
Yes.
And phytoplankton in the
Yes.
oceans? Perhaps like when it passes through a particularly active Van Allen belt, sometimes the ocean just lights up like the night sky.
I think that's a really cool idea. How do you feel about that, chat? And that would also give sort of some really interesting stuff we could play with during those times where the gas giant is effectively eclipsing Shoal from seeing the sun for months on end.
Water Borealis.
Water Borealis, yeah.
Yeah, I see what you mean about it being blurry.
We'll come up with a different name, but I think that would be a interesting little
All right, let me
wrinkle
pop
on
down.
the dark year. But yeah, we still haven't answered what the hell is a day.
I'll come back to that in just a second. Let me make this note. Water Borealis is going to be ocean lights up sometimes when passing through Van Allen belts Bioluminescence. I'm
So
spelling that wrong, but that's fine. I'll go back and fix it later.
I have survived.
You have, in fact,
With all of your
survived.
fingers? How many fingers do you have? Do you have all 8 of them?
I think I might be down to 6. There was a vicious nomming from Virgil. And then Virgil and Freya started throwing hands, and I mean, they were growling at each other and everything. It was the sweetest thing. Oh my goodness.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh.
Okay, somebody suggested a 48-hour day, which I think would make sense, considering the sort of scales that we're dealing with and what we're doing. So we'll do that. And a day is purely one axial rotation. That in itself doesn't necessarily have any cultural meaning to the people who live on this planet, because it is not defined by a light period and a dark period. It's just an axial rotation. And we're calling that a day because that's the terminology we as humans are used to. So, instead of having sub-days from reflected light, what we need to work out about is...
Oh, they're wiggling.
Light periods
Oh, there's a
and-
vicious puppy attack.
Oh, yep, the sisters are throwing hands.
It's a shame it's so blurry. I can't just turn it off and turn it back on again without having to fully restart OBS, I'm afraid.
Aw. I could go back in there and just be the cameraman, like it's, you know,
Yeah, move the
AEW.
camera lower down. That works if that's what you
National
want to do.
Geographic.
Because we're only going to be here for about another 15 minutes before I want to start closing things down and make sure I'm out of the way before...
I'm sorry I
Text
took
it
up so much
Why
time.
are you sorry? That was what you were here for, and we had a good time. It's fine.
Oh my, it was a wonderful time. Light periods and dark periods. Is this like
And now that we've got
the planetary eclipse?
Yeah, to do with that, and also, you know, when do we have light on the planet? When do we not? What notes do we think we need to take? I'm just having a quick catch up on what chat's suggesting.
Ooh, Tyler
Stark
German
light
has a very
seasons
good idea.
with actual. Okay, that's a really good idea.
Stark light and soft light. Ooh,
Stark light
I
season.
really like that.
Direct sunlight time. And then what did we say that the other was going to be?
Soft light.
Soft light season. Soft light season, when light is reflected light from other sources as...
/ eclipsed by Luastra.
as- Why did I just... I've been playing too much Monster Hunter. I need to type Lunastra. As Lunastra.
Aqua borealis. Charge flora, or better yet, fauna with light. They measure time and how much the light dims.
I
I don't know if the Aqua Borealis would be like a timekeeping measure, more just like a phenomena that happens during the orbit.
If you have it happening at specific times, though, it makes sense that things living on the planet might adapt to use that. And it could be used in just, you know, the simplest of ways is depending on the lifespan of certain plants. It might be that during that is when they all release their spores at the same time to propagate.
Ooh.
Okay, can you two please stop? Love, can you either be in or be out? Make a decision.
I'm trying. Sarah's
Thank you.
in.
The dogs are yelling. And then, of course, you have the other simple things that happen, like we have animals on our planet that navigate using the magnetosphere. Maybe it affects navigation of certain things. We have squid will come up to the surface to hunt during a full moon. Perhaps that sort of thing is affected. So I definitely think that any phenomena that we come up with should impact some flora and fauna. And that's going to be a lot of fun to explore. And that's going to be next week.
Oh, absolutely.
Do a load of that next week, which will be really fun. Merfolk in deeper waters might not recognize light cycles. Absolutely. There's definitely going to be a case of areas where it's just not relevant. And if we decide when we settle on some of our land masses, what few of them there are, if we have things living on there, it's obviously going to be a massive part of the life cycle on all of that. So... light periods and dark periods, I think, are going to be very important. Okay, what else has chat come up with? Almost as bright as a cloudy day. Yep, I agree. And calling it sort of stark light and soft light periods, I really like that. Okay, so one of the questions I wanted to ask was, what does the night sky look like from Shoal? But that's not really going to be a question that's meaningful now that we've worked this out, because the night sky is going to look very different depending on what's going on. So we have the long darks where everything's eclipsed. We know that we're going to have these meteor showers if it's a period where the moon is passing through the debris rings around the planet. So what does the night sky look like from Shoal? Depends on the time of year. I think that's something that we'll explore in literature when it becomes important.
Given like the prevalence of celestial bodies in this system, and depending on how close they are, I'm imagining something like the Skyrim night sky.
Yes.
All of those planes just hanging up in the sky, just like, oh, okay, those are a lot bigger than they should be if this was Earth.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, the night sky is definitely going to be just radically different throughout both the close and far years.
Yes.
Or grand year.
Yep.
Because like even what you're typing, like isn't a month named after the moon and
Yes.
the lunar cycle? And it's just we have our year tracking, and I don't know if these people would have.
Yeah, I don't think they'd look at the breakdown of time the same way that we do. And it says a lot about humanity that it's so ingrained in us that when I'm sitting down to figure out a world and questions to ask chat and have you guys feed back on, it's one of the sort of fundamentals that you want to build around as well. What constitutes a day? What constitutes a year? Well, it doesn't necessarily matter for the kind of world that we've built.
Given how orbital mechanics work here, as we've collectively decided, like I don't think culturally they would have the concept of what we call a month.
Yeah.
I think they might have seasons.
Yes, and I think those seasons will be radically different to what we think of them on Earth.
But it's just like, I think these seasons might be some sort of cultural, might be also adapted to the culture to differentiate quote unquote months.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to have to do a little bit more thinking on how we're going to represent that in terms of breaking it down. And my normal app that I use for figuring out calendars for other worlds is absolutely not going to work for Shoal in the slightest. I'll have to do a stream at some point where I talk about writing things.
NNT made an interesting point. Isn't the close year effectively a month by another name?
Yes, effectively.
Yes, because
in terms of importance to why it was devised by the people that track it, yes, but I don't think it would just be called a month.
No, because the close year is an Earth year, and the grand year is the rotation of the gas giant around the star.
Yeah. Can you feel your brain dribbling out your ears yet?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Ooh, Grimos. We do have multiple neighboring moons and tons of asteroids. There's also a possibility of reflected light and months of no darkness due to reflected light from the gas giant and direct light from the star.
Yeah, though of course there will be potentially some darkness just from the natural rotation of the planet. It's the moon itself.
So it's just like, also like for effectiveness, like I think the grand year and the close year at this point are more conceptually for us to decide like timelines and orbital mechanics, and we haven't really decided how much that affects the culture of these people.
Yeah, and I think the culture we shouldn't devise until we know what the celestial template looks like. I'm going to try and find and find some models that will let me put everything in motion and see if that can help with some visualizations for writing some of this up in the week to come.
Break break models.
Yes, and we'll see what happens, which is, well, you know, one of the things I like to do, especially with there's a lot of writing tools out there. There's some that I really like. You guys are looking at Scrivener right now, which is my favorite writing program, but there's calendar stuff out there for writers and all sorts. My favorite is Eon Timeline 2. I use that for tracking events in my stories, their calendars, important things that happen throughout history, for entire settings. It's brilliant. I love it. It cannot handle the concept of leap years the way that my other setting works, though. In my main setting, Hevner, because of the way that that planet orbits its star, it has a very consistent calendar, but it does have a leap year once every 5 years. And because the people of that planet are just eminently sensible, because the setup of their world is eminently sensible, which they're very lucky about, instead of saying, okay, well, this month is now going to be 1 day longer and that shifts everything by a day for the following year, no, there is 1 month that they just add an extra day to. That month has a 30-second day in it once every 5 years. And then you just start again with the next month and carry on, and nothing else changes. So Lenoba 1st will be on Mer Day every single year, forever. Lenoba 1st is always a Mer Day. That never changes despite the leap year. Aeon Timeline can't handle that. It wants to shift everything by 1 day. So breaking models and programs that are supposed to help me is just kind of a thing that I do. So we'll be fine with that.
Oh, do we have a brown dwarf in this system?
I don't think we definitively decided whether one of the gas giants was a brown dwarf. It would have to be our...
Wide Tom.
Yes, I think so, but I don't know how that would affect. I really need to get my hand on some planetary models. This is what I'm learning. This is what we need to do for next week. Let's focus on something a little bit simpler that we can get our brains around. And yeah, I do think Tomb needs to be the brown dwarf if we're going to do that. What do we want to do about land masses? Because we've got like 5 minutes left. How many land masses do we want to have?
I'm imagining various archipelagos and islands scattered, not necessarily a number of them, and perhaps due to tides and orbital mechanics, some close years they might be more or less submerged.
Yes, that was my personal opinion, was that we should have some land that appears above the water, especially as with a host planet as big as the one that we have, having the rock have a little bit of a sway to it. It is not going to be outside of the expected. There will be rock tides. It's just that the water is going to be far more important than that. So I do like the concept of having some land that's there, perhaps a few permanent islands that are very weathered by the very strong tides that we're going to have, but that the majority of the scattered islands that might be there are only there temporarily, that the tides will rise enough to wash over them.
They only appear every close year or so due to gravitational forces.
Yes. And then perhaps
Ed
we
just
get
has a land dump.
Yeah, some of the things that Ed's saying, I think, are things that Ed's mentioned before in previous streams, or other people have, and are going to be really, really important. And they are definitely things that we're going to have to talk about in terms of culture and how all of this has affected the people who live here. So
combining Lord Grimos's and German's ideas, Grimos says it says 2 larger land masses like the Philippines, Australia, the Southeast Asia, Asian Sea, all that stuff, with occupation size, various states of submerging. Maybe there are a few above constantly, but their shorelines are constantly changing.
yes,
And German said perhaps about 6 big land masses that are permanently dry. Yeah, I think surface land should be very limited
Extremely.
on an ocean world
Yeah.
like this.
or are often underwater, and we are looking about, so 6 was what the suggestion was. My gut tells me 4 would be a good choice, but if we want to do 6 works.
4 to 6. this is perhaps what we could have a poll about.
Yes, and I will do that poll next week simply because of how fast time is getting away from us. This will be things to, and we'll have to name them because that's very
The
important.
creative process is an absolutely engrossing one.
Isn't it? I love it. It's so much fun, and I'm so glad that
So
so
many
many people
tangents.
are engaged with this. When I was initially talking about, well, maybe I'll do a stream slot. Well, I don't want to do art because we've already got multiple great artists, and my method for how I draw is actually really boring to watch.
This is an entirely super enjoyable
Yeah, so I was like, well, I'm really into writing.
thing that you have here.
Writing is my first love. It's my initial passion, even above drawn art. So maybe I could do something with that, but I don't know if people
Writing
like it,
is
so we'll
art.
try. And then I'm like a couple of sessions in, and I'm like, okay, well, we've got this new setting going on, and there's currently 52 people here watching and listening, and all of these great ideas coming in, and I love this, and I'm so appreciative for the community that we have, which is categorically the best community on Twitch.
Basara seaports would be problematic with radically changing tide levels. Look at videos of the Bay of Fundy and its tides.
Yes, we will have to figure out how that sort of thing would be used. Now, again, I think what we're building here is a lot of these issues give us our reasoning for why this would be a mecha setting. We've got challenges that need to be overcome with methods that our understanding of real life would not solve. And we've got some fantasy elements we can play with, so that's where we then bring in the theming of why we're building Shoal in the first place, which is to have awesome mecha, which will probably at least be 50% crabs if chat gets their way.
Crab rave.
Yes.
How much of these land masses would be temporal, equatorial, or polar?
Yes.
I would expect, and this is just me, this is my opinion, chat can disagree, you can disagree. I'm just speaking to speak. Given how limited it is, I'd say like one of each.
I feel like we'd have a landmass at each of the poles, just because if we're going to have potentially an area where things do actually freeze over, that would be the sort of areas that could withstand having land, because the constant wish-washing of the tides would be different, and we'd be looking more at what ice does to land. So I feel like that could be
some sort of Antarctical landmass.
Yeah, so I feel like that would be good. I feel like the equator is probably going to be a very dangerous zone for land to exist, but it would make sense to have potentially
either due to like weather or fauna.
But I also feel like that's potentially an area where you could have a lot of volcanic activity causes land masses to erupt and perhaps make it up above the surface, but that they get eroded away quite quickly. And an area to sort of look at for that in real life would be the Galapagos area of the planet, where you do get these new islands erupting, and then they start to wear down, and eventually you can have life on them.
Chris, how hardish physics are we using?
We are using as much physics as my brain can handle, which is to say not too much.
We are using it works physics.
Yes. We're trying to give some justification for the things that we're doing, but we're not going down into hard math. We're just trying to walk that line of believable suspension of disbelief.
So how much of the land is a spread?
A spread, but the poles probably have the largest land.
Due to just the ice
In some ways
kind
would be
of like
protective.
eating the water
Yeah.
and just like being a buffer against the tides.
So for our larger land masses that we've decided will remain permanently above water, math is cool. I'm just terrible at it, NNT, which is the problem.
I have a math minor and I hate math.
Yes, I cannot math. Math was my weakest subject in school. I passed, but I know math good.
Are there forests? I think there would be plants, but not as we know trees.
I think what might make sense here is if we stop here and let me write up what we've done this week, and look at that when we pick this up next week. Because I said next week we were going to start looking at flora and fauna, what sort of things we think would exist on this world that would be believable, and from that we can then decide if there are forests. Are they trees? Is it something else? Do they stay in place? Do we have wandering kelp forests? And
that would
look
be
at
funny.
that. Yeah, kelp forests do need fairly calm water, you're right. But maybe that's why they just decide to get up and wander off elsewhere when things start getting stormy. We'll have to have a look. So I think maybe we'll deal with those questions next week when we start looking at flora and fauna, because I think we've got most of the geology settled down. And if
Quinn has a
What is Quinn's?
landmark for you.
Ooh. That's very cool. Let me write that down. A set of volcanic islands called Titan's Teeth. Literally all volcanic vents. And I do know somebody mentioned last week about the idea of having some very jagged islands sticking out that would have a name like that. I don't remember if that was Quinn list or not, but that is a recurring idea that you guys have fed in. So I do think it's something we need to add.
So yeah, no. You said like you wanted next week to be plants and animals.
Yeah, I think that would be a good thing to do next week. That also gives me some time to see if I can find some astral models I can go and break and try and get our head around some ideas. And then we'll see where we go from there. My work this upcoming week is not quite as intensive as what I have been doing, so I might have some time to get some sketches out as well. We'll have to wait and see. But we are at 20 minutes past the hour. Tex and Depp are, to the best of my knowledge, taking over at 1/2 the hour. I haven't heard anything one way or the other. So
You mean Teppendex?
Teppendex, yes. Buy one, get one free. I think
Could
yes.
I ask a favor of you
Of course
really
you
quick?
can. What's that?
Could you please go back to the PDF and go to
course I
page
can.
53?
That wasn't our dogs.
No, that's Watson. He wants to go outside.
Hello, Watson.
Let's do some big old scrolls.
I'm used to our dogs being the noisy ones
Yeah.
on screen.
Our dogs are incredibly noisy on stream.
53.
Yep, looking for
Yes.
the 50s, 80s, 70s, 60s, 53.
So we were talking about the Roth.
There they are.
That is the Roth.
Teppendex does sound like a cleaning product. Yes, it does, and it's all Aiden's fault.
I had a derp moment and called them Teppendex instead of Tex and Depp, and it just kind of became lodged in my brain ever since.
And then this is the end of the racial character, the new races. So if you scroll up, it will be the Vect,
Give me just a second.
which
I
is
will
the
do so.
Warforged race.
There we go.
Sentient robots. Up above that is the Scathari, which are barbarian bugs, technophobes.
They're very
The
cool.
Stardak Nor, for those of you who are familiar with Twilight Imperium.
The Dan Bola, Space Cowboy, that was my brother's character.
Amazing. We got the orcs. The
That's the
Nautilids are very cool. I really enjoyed reading about them.
Reverse Big Daddies.
Yes.
Again, I'm thinking Twilight Imperium because the Jolnar have a similar concept of being an aquatic race. They don't go into the detail of how they move around, though, like that does.
And then very Egyptian, Aviara.
Yep.
And then the last one right above is one of my personal favorite, the Meebs.
And they are adorable. Adorable
Exactly.
little slimelings.
Little goo boy.
They are fun. All right.
Right,
So
we got to get out of here, otherwise we're going to get told off.
thank you for having me, Lady Red.
Thank
I
you
appreciate
very
your
much for
help.
joining us. I hope you had a good time, because I certainly
Oh, I
enjoyed talking
did.
about all of this with you.
Maybe now that we've established the baseline for, what the overarching setting is, that sets the foundation. So maybe next time talk specifics on...
Yep.
Oh yeah,
Story
having a baseline foundational and thoughts to words to speaking has definitely helped.
Yep.
Yep.
So next week we will have Crispy with us talking about storytelling and writing for comic books. And then perhaps the week after that, if Doc wants to come back, maybe we'll see him again then, and we will figure it out from there.
I will have progress.
Thank you very much, chat, for being here, for all of your input, for listening, and just being, again, the best community on Twitch. There are a lot of places you could spend your time. For some reason, you keep spending it with us, and we are eternally grateful. Have a wonderful evening, a great start to your weekend, and I will see you next week. Ciao!
Bye.